Well, hey Liz,
Hi.
how are you doing?
Great. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you very well.
Awesome. Happy to be here.
Amazing. And we have almost matching lipsticks, which is always a good start.
Yes, a little red lip goes a long way.
I know, I know. Well, for those of you who are not familiar with somehow Dropbox and what it is, I mean, it's a tech product. It started as a storage space, as a cloud storage space. Now it's much more. It's a smart
Hmm.
workspace with lots of great products like Dropbox Paper that allows people to collaborate. And Liz is a creative director of Brand Studio there. So she's in charge of amazing Dropbox brand and making sure that everywhere online it looks the same, feels the same, and people love it the same way. But we'll talk more about what Liz does in a second. But let's start with our favorite rapid fire questions. Are you
I'm
ready?
ready.
Great, 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 great. Okay. Who did you want to be when you were growing up?
I wanted to be an astronaut in preschool. Nobody specific, but space was amazing to me. Not super awesome at math, so it didn't work out for me. So,
That's a good dream, I think. Dreaming big. I love it. Describe yourself in 3 words.
oh, optimistic, energetic, and clueless.
Nice, nice. West Coast or East Coast?
Oh, West Coast all the way.
Love it.
I have a very biased answer to that, given I'm on the West Coast, so.
Understandable, understandable. Designer or creative person you admire?
Oh, that would actually be my father. And we can talk more about that too, but he actually got me into design and the creative field. So he's been a big source of motivation and inspiration for me. So thanks, Dad, if you're watching.
Amazing. Wow. Achievement you are most proud of?
Oh, the birth of my son. Yeah, I had my son first child last year, and talk about like not being able to be in control of something, shifting timelines, multiple deliverables. The birth of a child is pretty up there.
I mean, it is a miracle of life. So definitely beats everything.
Yeah, he's the hardest creative project I think I'll have of my life. So
That's a good description.
yeah.
Your favorite book?
I just recently read Severance by Ling Ma. So that's kind of at the top of my list right now. So check it out if you haven't read it.
I haven't, so definitely will. What's your guilty pleasure?
Reality TV, which is like such an easy answer because that's probably everybody's guilty pleasure right now. But I've definitely binge watched way too many seasons of certain shows. But it's a nice break from actual reality by watching like fake reality.
Any
But it's
particular shows? Give us one.
it's a guilty pleasure, so I can't tell you the name of them. No, I will tell you one. I recently binge watched the season of Alone. It's on Netflix. But if anybody would tell you the synopsis of this show, they'd be like, hard no. It's literally a person by themselves filming themselves in the wilderness. But the magic of creative editing and storytelling, I was hooked. So that's my most recent guilty reality show pleasure.
Oh, amazing. I haven't checked that one out, so a lot for me to do after this. Your favorite font?
Oh God, you can't ask a designer that question.
Your favorite font today?
For those watching out there that may know what I'm talking about, I'm going to leave a little plug to my friend Kyle Benson, who designed a typeface called Gooper, which is awesome. So very cool. It's a very cool font from that foundry. So it's beautiful. It's kind of a throwback to Cooper, has a lot of personality, and it's actually been used a lot recently. So yay.
Oh, good, good shout out. An obsession that only your friends know about.
Okay, an obsession only my friends know about. Ooh, my probably my obsession with pre-packing for trips. I tend to like overly pack and compartmentalize things into containers and cubes like weeks before a trip. There's some weird art to it, while at the same time maybe some weird anxiety but I get a lot of pleasure out of it. So anybody that
Sounds
goes on
fun.
anybody that goes on trips with me or has been involved knows that I overpack too much, but I get a great joy out of it.
Brilliant. As long as it brings joy, I think it's a good excuse. Working from home or office fun?
I think it depends on the day, but I do enjoy right now at least working from home. I think given my role and just sort of the work that I do, it's a lot of meetings. So just the thought of having to run across multiple buildings to meeting rooms versus just being able to sit and take those meetings from home allows me to focus on my work a little bit more and also kind of make my own schedule.
Brilliant. Last question. What is the best part about working for Dropbox?
The people. Easy. The people. Tech is tech, and there's lots of fun things to do there. But I've been in sort of tech in Silicon Valley for a while now, and what draws me really are the teams that you want to be a part of. I think there's always products and tech things and anybody in this world. It's quite the ecosystem, and I think what has been a really constant North Star for me is to go towards the people that align with my values, that collaborate the same way I do, and that just believe in sort of the same values and mission that I seek to find out in work. And also just making sure that, we have to be with these people, for many hours out of the day. And part of what I enjoy doing is, making that a fun atmosphere. Anybody on my team knows that I am fully myself. So the people it's been a really great qualifier for me when I look for places that I want to work. And Dropbox really hit it out of the park with that. Especially, given that, Dropbox Design is a large organization, it actually still feels quite small. So I feel very fortunate.
And that's actually a good segue to the rest of our conversation. But thank you for answering this very, very hard question.
Not too hard at all.
Brilliant. Well, let's start from the actual very beginning. Could you tell your story a little bit? Because your career journey wasn't as linear and straightforward. So first of all, what was your childhood like? You mentioned your dad. How did you realize that you want to work in creative field, and how did that develop into a job and a career?
Oh, such a loaded question, but I'm happy to answer it. I actually think it's really cool to understand sort of the background of people that you get to work with, because everybody has such diverse experiences and background and perspectives that really make work better. But to go back to your question about, I guess, the beginning. So I'm adopted. And so I was raised actually for the first 5 years of my life in Alaska, which is really cool. And then, moved to the States, once I was 5 to be closer to family. My father from a really young age was always a creative. His mother, my grandmother, was an art teacher. And she was also a pretty avid art and antique collector. So, even when I was a little girl visiting my grandparents and you're like, oh, I don't want to go to an antique store, or I don't want to look at this art, when you're younger, you're annoyed by it, but it's something that's been pretty embedded in me, my entire life, consciously or subconsciously. I still remember my grandmother would always have art supplies, or, she had this big chalkboard that I would always draw on. So it was definitely something that was in me from a young age. And then I still vividly remember when I was in high school, my father gave me his metal, like full body metal 35 millimeter camera, super heavy.
Wow.
They would never make them like that anymore. And it was just from there, I couldn't put it down. So I tell myself I was actually a photographer before I was, I would say, a designer. And a lot of that comes from just my father's love of photography as, an amateur photographer. And that really seeped into sort of how I view the world. So I feel very fortunate to have, a family that really supported creative endeavors, as scary as that can be for a parent. So that's sort of the beginnings of it. And then after I went to college for specifically graphic design in Ohio. And then sort of found my way to Chicago after school. And like you were saying, kind of had a sort of like a weird maze of a career in that I've touched a lot under the umbrella of what we call graphic design. So I actually initially started in architecture. I was an environmental graphic designer, which has nothing to do with the environment, like saving animals, which is a very amazing job. But it has to do with actually branded spaces. So I was working in a more of a three-dimensional canvas, working with interior designers and architects to create branded experiences. So that was a little bit of a more atypical start, I think. But it also made me think outside of what, I was more traditionally trained in school, type and layout and logos. It was actually about, here's a 200,000 square foot space, make this feel like X. So it was a really eye-opening experience for me. And then from there, I sort of moved into, I was in Chicago, so moved into editorial art direction, working in, basically, I think it was, I don't remember that, maybe like 11 by 20 page. So, really getting to the fundamentals of design, type, layout, working a lot with photo editing. So then went from architecture to publishing, and then finally sort of, Chicago is an amazing community of small agencies, big agencies. It's a really great design community there. So that's when, after I left sort of publishing, I moved into the agency space. And that's where I made the exciting transition to web design, which was a little earlier in my career. I was like a hardcore print designer. Somebody told me, hey, this needs to be in RGB and not at 300 DPI. And I was like, what? It'll be, when you print it, it won't be high res. So I was very, very early. I was very not like beginner at web design when I started. Shout out to a lot of the people at my agency I worked at that taught me web design. It was a great way to learn it. And also work with a lot of small businesses to help really give them a brand and give them a voice and a presence on the internet for, a mom and pop shop. So that was really fun. And I guess from there was my entrance into the wild west of tech. So I left Chicago in, I think, 2013, and moved out to California, to San Francisco, and worked for Facebook for 4 years. And then, so big tech. And then from there, wanted something, just wanted to try. I still really enjoyed the tech world. And specifically at Facebook, I was on the in-house team. So it was, switching from agency to in-house was really interesting and eye-opening. And did that for 4 years at Facebook. And then wanted to try something a little smaller just to see how tech worked in a smaller company. And then moved to a company called Intercom. And then also helped sort of co-lead their brand studio team as well. So I guess the last little bit less than a decade, again, I'm not good at math, really opened my eyes to finding sort of my niche in building brands in-house in tech. And I realized that I really should start to leverage my knowledge and experience there, given that I've been doing it for so long. And that's sort of what led me to Dropbox. They really got my attention in 2017. I was working at Intercom at the time, and, it was really refreshing to just see, a tech company really invest in building a new brand. It was bold, a little weird. It had a point of view. You weren't exactly sure what was going on, but you knew it drawed you to it. So, after I had a lot of conversations with Colin Whitehead, who's the current director of brand at Dropbox, it really sounded like there were some really juicy and complex problems to be solved at Dropbox. And I loved how, we could really use the opportunity to use brand to create better and richer experiences for our customers. Spoiler alert, no matter where you go, big, small, medium, small, medium, there's always problems. So there's always problems to be solved. That's what I've definitely learned in going large, medium, small. To be honest, I was a little hesitant in continuing to push into tech just because, I had sort of done both spectrums. But again, back to the team, it was undeniable the draw towards Dropbox because of the team, because of the integrity of their brand and the courage to push that brand forward and rely on it as a really important value towards actual customers. And I truly believe that Dropbox understands that problem to be solved. And I'm so here to help solve it, as messy as it gets.
Amazing. Oh, I love this story. And I love how unusual it is, and kind of it might seem very logical because now we can see that the main theme throughout your career is brands and building brands in branded environments, whether it's online or offline, and kind of now it all makes sense. But I'm sure in the middle of it, it was quite confusing, and I want to dig deeper a little bit into that because I feel like for all of us, when we are in the middle of a journey, whatever journey it is, sometimes it is very confusing where we're going, is that the right path? And for you, especially because you changed industries quite a bit from kind of environmental to traditional print and graphic to web and digital and now kind of tech, it must have been quite confusing as well. So do you remember, first of all, when you studied graphic design and then kind of got into your first jobs, first of all, did you know that you'll end up working for brand? Did you know what branding was? As well as, what were the kind of crucial points for you to understand that, okay, this is time to pivot. I won't look for another job as a graphic designer. I won't look for another thing that I've done before.
That's a great question. I think a lot of designers in general, I mean, you know, graphic design is so broad. We're so fortunate to be able to create on a canvas that's so broad, so many channels. You know, I think that's exciting, but at the same time, that's overwhelming. Because I don't know what the quote is, but you know, you don't want to like do everything mediocre. At least for me, I found that I was becoming earlier in my career, I was definitely more of a generalist. You know, and I wanted to strategically start to just test out different, you know, channels of design. I think it was really in my time in Chicago when I worked for a handful of smaller branding agencies that I really understood the meaningfulness of creating a really strong, not just like a brand as in, oh, cool, like we have like a logo and a website, but really manifesting that brand through multiple ways and creating a narrative and giving a voice and a vision and a face to, again, in Chicago, small businesses. That felt just so fulfilling to me that, a small business has an amazing product, like they make cookies or they're, a bakery or something. And the only thing holding them back is just, a good slick of paint kind of thing, and understanding like, what does your company stand for? Like, who are you? What are your values that you believe in, that you want to, ingest into, your website or your mark or your packaging? That to me, looking at brand as a holistic thing, not just, a magazine or a website or a business card, but looking at it holistically, was just really, I felt like I felt like I was seen, I guess. And I think that you can see from my career that I have dabbled in a lot of things. And I think that allows me to really think about everything that goes into a brand, not even just visual. Think about voice and tone and how you message and the values and the brand attributes that you want your company to actually represent. It's not just, the visuals of like a great color palette and type. Those are just the elements that you as a creator need to use to help tell the right story. So that's how I found that, being in brand specifically was kind of where I felt the most free. And then I would say when I finally made the big jump to the West Coast and, at an agency, you work with lots of different clients. There's diversity. There's, you move on from one thing to the next. I decided to, be a little more monogamous to a brand. And I think there's a very unique opportunity out here on the West Coast where companies really are invested in brands. So they create in-house teams. So all my experience in the West Coast has been working for brand in-house, which is a little atypical from, more of us in like the Midwest or other places. Larger companies like a Facebook or a Dropbox just has, enough budget and, opportunity to create in-house teams. Anybody that has been in-house in anything in brand knows it's complicated, beautiful, delicate thing, and that goes beyond just visual and brand, but also about galvanizing and evangelizing people, bringing teams together, working cross-functionally, again, really going deep into something and really understanding the real problem. And those things are really hard that I've realized. But for me, it makes the work more meaningful and have more substance to it. So in-house, I really enjoyed the massive challenges and obstacles to being an in-house brand team, but also the value that I really think in-house teams can bring to a company.
Oh, absolutely. And I totally get your kind of feeling about there is more that can be done about each brand, and being in-house, you have the opportunity to create those experiences that again link everything together and feel the same and feel special. And you
Yeah.
mentioned a lot of challenges of being in-house and looking after one brand and creating those experiences. Could you tell a bit more about those, and what are your main challenges, and what I suppose all of us who might not be on a brand site don't know about building brands and should know about building brands, especially digital brands?
Yeah, I would love to. I deal with challenges every day, but again, it makes the work better. I think for me, there's a couple important, I think, challenges being in-house. One is you're just dealing with a lot of people. You no longer have the pleasantries of a client agency relationship. You are your own client. Your cross-functional partners are who you are servicing and who you are supporting. So I think that there comes a lot of, communication barriers there, right? I say this all the time. Our user doesn't know, Dropbox's customer and Dropbox's user does not know the weird organizational structure or layout of Dropbox. So that should not affect a user's experience. They don't know that there's 5 different orgs and 5 different teams creating this one experience for a customer. They just experience as Dropbox. So I think a lot of the trouble, or not trouble, but a lot of the challenge being in-house brand is connecting teams. Everybody is really focused on their goals and their metrics that in the end all ladder up to the same objective. But big companies, it's really about, I think I used the word before, but like really galvanizing the rest of the company to believe in the larger holistic problem to be solved, which is creating cohesive brand throughout the entire experience. Which is another sort of kind of segues into the other big problem I see, or challenge in being in-house, is just, looking at the overall end-to-end experience. When you work in-house, you actually have the data and the research and the control that agencies don't have. You have the insight of your customer. You're able to actually test and validate and experiment some of your assumptions. So with that, anybody that works on the canvas that is the World Wide Web knows that it's as effective as it is unruly. So, one of the things that I think is important is, understanding and creating a cohesive end-to-end experience for a customer. And I believe that is something you really can only do in-house because you have full visibility to everything.
And can you give an example? Because we can all agree that creating a cohesive experience is great, but what does it mean, and how do you connect those teams? And I suppose also, how do you match the kind of the business goals with the work that you do? I can imagine there are certain teams that would request increase the conversion. Brand is brand, but we need increased conversion from the website. So how do you leverage your role to actually reach those goals, as well as while creating this amazing branding experience?
It's a great question. I'm still figuring it out. No, but when I say, what do I mean by end to end? So I really mean like from the beginning to the end. So, from the banner ad that, and I'm thinking this all within like the digital, end to end flow, which is right now is the majority of it. So when you think of end to end, you think the first is, from the ad, the banner ad that you see and you take in and is creating awareness for Dropbox, like, oh, cool. So from the ad that you see into that leads you into a prospective user to the website where they can discover and learn more information in order to push them to commit, to actually onboarding them into the product, to actual product use. So when I say end to end, I mean that entire life cycle that you, a customer, would go through. I think it's super important that there is a cohesiveness in your brand throughout that entire experience. I think in tech, we often think end to end within what my silo and vertical is, but brand is actually a very, very uniquely positioned to think horizontally across all functions of a business. So we're in a very unique position to have a perspective on on how we want the brand expressions, volume to increase or decrease depending on where the user is in the journey. So it's not a very binary answer. It's actually, that's why I say it's a complex problem to be solved, in that, what is the role of illustration? What is the role of photography? What is the role of our colors? How do they, increase and decrease in volume based off of where a user is at in a journey? And having a lot of these considered thoughts about your elements creates a much more cohesive experience for your user. And, in the end, creates more trust. We wouldn't want to show a user an ad that doesn't look anything like the site they're going to be landing on, and then use different language to explain something that we didn't use when they first saw it. That's really confusing for a user.
Absolutely. And can I quickly jump on what you're saying, because it's so amazing how you talk about the kind of the role of illustration and the colors and everything, and kind of having this big vision of the whole journey and kind of how you need to look at. Do you have like any guiding principles? So do you first like define so this is our brand goals, this is how we want our user to feel, and then you always refer back to this document? So what are these set of principles? Where do they sit, and how do you use them throughout this journey?
Yes, and yes. I think, because it is an unruly, ecosystem, and there are a lot of different players, there are a lot of different teams, it's super, super important to define as a design organization. So specifically, Dropbox Design, what is the strategic approach of your brand, and what are those important core pillars that are always constant? So at Dropbox, we have an amazing brand strategy team and just great creative leadership that has allowed design in general, Dropbox Design, not only brand, but also product, UX writing, and design research, to have a shared set of language and goals that, agnostic of channel or medium or team, these are things that we hold to be true within Dropbox Design, that no matter what, it is our jobs to manifest it on our particular surface. So at Dropbox Design, we have, a design strategy that we use, and then, breaking down from there, we have core pillars, and a lot of context on how we got to all these things. And then, sort of the waterfall down from there is, okay, we have these pillars, we have this like guiding strategy. Now we have this, this set of, 10 to 12, we call them brand elements. So that's type, that's color, that's, sort of our perspective on how we lay out our pages. And all of those different elements need to come together at varying degrees, depending on where you're at for our customers' experience. So just for example, we may use more bold colors and more striking illustration and photography in our advertising. So more in like what you see, because we need to create awareness. We need to drive people and get people excited in the sea of a feed. That's our most brand forward, probably bold, and, most creatively expressive manifestation of our brand. But as you actually get pulled, as you follow a customer into sort of, they're probably going to go to the website, right? That can still be really beautiful. But to what you said earlier, it still needs to convert. So, we might actually pull back on some of our color because there's a lot more content, and we want people to be able to discover and digest what's important to them. So it definitely has more of a utilitarian role, while at the same time, it is provided as like a brand handshake from ads. And then obviously when you get more into the product, it's very utilitarian. And Dropbox specifically, the voice of the brand actually wants to recede a little bit, and it's more about your content, right? Dropbox is where you can store your content. You can also work and collaborate with your team. And we really want your team, the people of your team, and your content to be king. So you'll see the brand voice and the different elements we use, like, type, color, layout, recede a little bit. So if you were to look at it in a spectrum, the narrative should stay consistent, but the way you tell that will vary depending on, where the user is. Again, it's all about the customer. It should never really be about the brand. It should be the brand actually adapting to and meeting the customer where they're at. But also to your point about conversion too, yes. And I think that any brand person listening is like, oh, data, numbers, KPIs, because we're like emotional and we care about how we feel. But I'd like to think that when you actually marry the beauty and the storytelling of brand with the insanely smart and efficient thinking of our partners on the growth product design teams that I work with every day, you get a really beautiful balance of, maintaining the integrity of your brand, but also balancing it with, the real needs of a user, which is like comprehension of content, clicking through to actually commit and buy. So my experience at Dropbox is that, they really shouldn't be seen as two different teams. It's just different arms of the same body. And when those can work insanely integrated together, you sort of the mind and the logic and what the users need with maintaining the beautiful storytelling and visuals of a brand. You have like a perfect marriage. And I think that, a lot of tech companies and a lot of brands, they're still challenged to figure out what that balance is. I don't think it should be adversarial. It shouldn't be versus. It should actually be like, we're the same team.
I love this approach, and especially how you talk about kind of collaborating with other teams, and what you mentioned earlier. Actually, the only magic happens when you link all the teams together and think about this as one thing rather than separate elements of it. Do you remember any examples? And I know we all want a magical answer, but a small thing that you changed and it actually improved, whether it's conversion or time, whatever metric you had that was important for the rest of the teams through the power of design, whether it was you changed the color or you completely swapped the things. Any examples that you remember that did something different?
Well, I'm going to not talk about button color because I'm sure everybody that knows about buttons could talk about it ad nauseum. So I'm going to skip that one because that's like low hanging fruit. I will say something that we're doing at Dropbox now is actually integration of the brand element of photography. That seems like something really easy, but it's actually really hard in the tech world just because, photography is, ideally you go out and shoot photography so that it's really specific to your audience and your brand. That's hard to do. It's expensive. You also have, stock photography is, a big, hole of despair at times. But we found that, through a lot of research, again, being in-house, we can rely on our design research team to actually get us inputs on what our users actually want. And so what they found was that we were using a lot of just kind of UI representations, so visuals that just showed like the actual interface of Dropbox. And because we were using that a lot, I think it started to not resonate with people. And really, when you think about Dropbox for certain lines of business, like personal, it's all about my stuff. It's all about like, can I imagine myself in this, landing page using Dropbox? And the goal was to bring in photography more to connect users' real stories and how they relate to Dropbox to the actual product value of the brand or of what we do. So starting to bring in photography was a really important way we started to get to gain better comprehension of what value we do bring. Specifically, we were using a lot of stock photography just because we weren't able to do shoots. So a way that we're finding is a good way to sort of marry sort of the more, sterile UI assets is by pairing those with photography. Not only does that make the UI more human and relevant because we can actually create user simulated content in the UI asset. So like if the copy is about work from anywhere, we could show, images in the UI of somebody reminiscing on a trip. And then it also at the same time allows us to pair it with a stock photo, which, stock is whatever, but it actually gives us that layering makes the stock photography actually more ownable. So it was kind of like a 2-for-1. We were able to resonate with users a lot better because they saw themselves in these stories, while at the same time sort of making some of our stock pulls feel a little more ownable to Dropbox, which is really hard with sort of stock photography. So that's like one example of an element of a brand that has actually increased some of our user conversion and comprehension by just like a small way to relate more to your customers.
Oh, I love this example. And I love how it kind of flips the concept of product and product branding on its head, because it's not about product, as you said, it's all about how customers use it and the situations and contexts that users are in when they need it or they want it or they find the most value of it. I think that's a very, very, very good example. Thanks for sharing.
When users can see themselves and when they can relate to the stories, they feel seen. So, the way, people use Dropbox in very, very, very different ways. And it is a world now where our lives are messy, and Dropbox acknowledges that, and they even honor it in a way. So to then see, for example, me, I'm juggling a child at home and I have lots of paperwork, and to actually to see that Dropbox understands the needs that I have and may even reveal new needs that I didn't know that I had, is a great way to connect with our users in a way that isn't so product focused. I guess it's more about like, let me relate to you as a human first, and then I can actually show you ways to bring a little structure to the messiness of life.
Brilliant. I think it kind of links to the whole idea of in general user-centered design, that obviously in product world is something everyone relies on and everyone understands, but in the brand world, kind of user-centered design is not necessarily what you would think of when you start. I think traditionally all advertising and brand was more about aspirations than the user needs. And now brands are shifting more into exactly what you mentioned, like very customer-centric environments and different characters, so everyone can see themselves in the product. Similar, like in a product world, you would test it on different customers and you do research into who your people are, but now it applies to brand experiences and advertising as well. This is fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to shift our gears a little bit into a very interesting topic that I was looking forward to discuss with you, and it's very important topic of leadership.
Yes.
So you're very passionate about inclusivity at the workplace and in general inclusive leadership. Could you tell a bit more about it? What's your viewpoint on it? And I suppose why you're so passionate about it?
Yeah, I would love to talk about this. I think being a woman in leadership is a great honor. It's also, a lot of responsibility. We as, leaders in the creative field, we're also hiring managers. So to me, that's like a really important responsibility that I take seriously. So, I would tell anybody that's of hiring manager status that we really have an opportunity to build the teams that we want to, and to build inclusive cultures, to, build inclusive teams, not only of, ethnicity, but also of diversity of background and perspective and expertise. That, I found, the more different opinions and the more different perspectives makes the work so much better, because who would want to just have everything be the same, because that's going to ultimately create a homogeneous result. So I found that not only in including diversity of race in your team, and having women in leadership, just underrepresented minorities in leadership is super important to me. I also think that specifically tech companies, they have the budget and the resources to put in the hard work to bring a more diverse pipeline. And it's something that, earlier in my career, I didn't have that responsibility of hiring or actually influencing hiring pipeline processes. But now I feel a responsibility to the design community, to really be able to make people feel safe with their opinions and their perspectives. I think really early in my career, I didn't feel that way, that my voice didn't matter. And it took me a long time to gain the confidence, and then to be able to also like advertise to other people, like, hey, I like it's important that you bring a different opinion here. That's what I need you for, because unless we challenge each other, the work suffers.
Absolutely. And definitely the point of diversity and bringing different voices to the workplace, I think it's such an important subject. But I think another part of it that you kind of mentioned, which becomes even more important, is the point of inclusivity and bring your authentic self to work, which is something very interesting, because it's one thing to just hire a lot of great different people and then make them all wear suits and pretend they're all the same types of people, which actually hurts everyone. So why is it important for you to bring your authentic self to work, and how can you help others to do that, or encourage others to be their authentic selves?
I really think it comes a little bit from like top down in a way, right? Early in my career, I definitely felt the pressure to fit a certain like designer mold. Maybe that was because I'd never been in a tech company before that was like corporate and like all these frameworks and structures. And I think my own creativity suffered a little bit, or my own voice suffered, because I didn't have the confidence to be myself. So I worked really hard over maybe the past 5 years to bring my authentic self to work. And anybody that has worked with me at any company knows that I'm definitely fully me. So I like to think that when I, as a leader, managing a team, managing people, when I bring that energy, quirkiness, bad days, good days to my team, they actually feel like it's an inclusive environment where they can do the same, or I'd like to think so. We all have good days, we all have bad days. I'm a very empathetic person, so things happen that we don't know about, and we all need to be sensitive to what other people are going through. It's a hard time right now. Being a creative is already just emotionally draining because all these ideas and so I try to make sure that like people have the freedom to be who they are. I'm a big supporter of taking time off. Your work suffers when you always prioritize yourself first above the work, like number one always. Not all, I don't know if all cultures support that, but I believe that you really have to prioritize yourself in order to do good work. So creating a team, building a new culture for your team, I just think is awesome and fun, and I feel honored that I get to be a part of it. And it's a collaborative experience. I'm I guess technically the leader, but I also joined Dropbox to learn from other people and get pushed and grow and be challenged. And I have been. So there's no lack of that.
Brilliant. And I love how you talk about quirkiness and kind of getting it top down, starting with yourself, bringing your authentic self, and that will definitely encourage other people slowly get out of their shells and just be themselves at work, which is so important, especially in the creative world.
Yeah, empowerment is so important for a team. Empowering your designers, there's definitely many ways to be a creative director. I think we all know that there's, certain flavors, there's certain methods. And I wouldn't say one is better than the other. They're all just different ways to do it. I think my approach is the more, the better, as in I want people's ideas. I'm not very authoritative. I don't say these are the things you need to do, so then do them. That would be really bad work, because that would just be me. My team does all the great work, not me. It's actually about using their ideas and empowering them to come up with better solutions to problems than I would have thought. Again, I need to get out of my head and actually rely on my team to create awesome stuff. And I'm not sure if, at least in my experience, it hasn't always been like that. But, creating inclusivity also means inclusivity of, opinion and perspective, and giving people, and being patient, and giving people enough time where they can develop their own ideas, because creativity is a process.
Love it. Time and patience. I have a question to you. You mentioned good days, bad days. I don't want to talk about bad days, because especially when you are at a senior position, every day brings its own challenges. And I would love you to share any sort of stories that you remember, or any particular day that you remember from your current job or previous jobs where it was tough, like it was a really tough day, whether it's about your team decisions or something, it wasn't, you didn't feel great at all. And how did you get out of it?
Yeah, I can definitely think of a couple. I'm going to kind of go further back in the archives for me, and I'm going to identify a really bad performance review I got. I got some really hard feedback in a performance review at a job that I was at. Let's just say there were tears involved. It was not one of my prouder moments. I think I left the room in tears and left for the rest of the day. And it was a really defining moment for me, because I think that, something that's important is that failure is a necessary part of the creative process. And my fear of failure was so overwhelming. I felt like, to fail or to not do something well means I'm done. But it's actually, and I'm so grateful for all of the failures that I've had, and there's been a lot, because that just, failure is uncomfortable, and it sucks, and it's hard. but it's that discomfort that creates growth. And I would say a lot of where I am now as a leader in managing teams and managing personalities and managing creatives has come from a lot of my failures, because I was really averse to feedback. I was really averse to change and failure. And it was so essential for me to hit that milestone in the creative process and get it over with and be like, cool, you failed a lot. You're going to keep failing. Be okay with that, because it's going to make you a way better leader, mentor, and designer. And I learned that failure lesson a little later in my life. Like, I didn't learn it in high school or even college. It wasn't until I got a little further in my design career where I'm like, wait, when you work really hard, you can still not do well. So that like revelation to me, I'm just so thankful that I had, because I also try to remind my designers and just how I approach my work that you're supposed to fail. It is totally okay to fail, because it's going to make you better. It's going to give you an edge on the person that hasn't failed yet. And it's going to give you more perspective and empathy towards hard work is hard. Work like designing and putting something out into the world for everybody to criticize is super hard. And we're like masochists for being creatives and doing it, but it's fine.
I love it. And I thank you so much for sharing this and mentioning kind of the hard moments of bad reviews. And I think all of us had those. And I think it is sometimes very, very difficult for younger designers, or just, to be honest, anyone. When you get the first one, you always feel like you are the only one who got it, and you feel very, very bad about it. But as you said, only through this uncomfort, that's where the growth comes. And definitely I can reflect back on bad reviews that I had that helped me to reflect what I can do better. And I definitely improve in those areas. So I can only thank people who gave me their honest opinion, because otherwise we would be stuck at the same place. And we have more questions from people, which is amazing. One question from there is Saima. How do you protect your time and reach goals while remaining empathetic? I assume this is to do with empathetic to the team, and how to protect your time while being empathetic to the team.
Yeah, I learned this at my first tech job, but ruthless prioritization. So you have to be ruthless in how you prioritize, or else you're just going to get, flooded with too much. I also think that, in sort of using empathy to manage some of this, I tend to always protect my team. So I would say that I do a good job at probably protecting my team. I think that's really important in understanding not only what is their workload, but also what are they interested in. It's not so much like, cool, like here, business as usual, but something that I find fulfilling is taking the time to listen to my team, to be like, hey, you're really busy with, X, Y, and Z, but what are you really passionate about? What are some of your skills blind spots, and how can we find better opportunities that are actually outside of, business as usual? You're like, oh, you're interested in animation? Let's find like ways that you can actually learn those skills on either projects that we're on now or outside of those projects. And it is my responsibility to make space for that for my team. While at the same time trying to make space in general to manage it all. So I'll get back to you on my own prioritization, but I think I do a good job at protecting and sort of guarding my own team, by balancing just the normal business as usual with also their own career growth and development.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks for sharing this. Really good advice. We have more questions.
Come at me.
Recommend some books and courses that we can read to be better creatives. Any books that really helped you learn?
I don't do a lot of books, so I don't know any books, but I highly, highly recommend online courses in general. There are so many on the internet, from specifically for me, like understanding more about front-end dev and coding, right? There's, oh my gosh, so many coding boot camps just to even understand the language of code, because I work on interactive surfaces, so a lot of web. While I might not be an amazing front-end developer, I think it's super important to understand how that system works, its taxonomy, its words, how certain, just understanding that responsive world. So I think, I'm blanking right now because this is live. But any online courses of something like that, I think is super beneficial. And I've learned a lot from it. People have told me to check out Masterclass. I haven't done that yet.
I actually do masterclass. I think they're more, it's more of a documentaries about people rather than learning experiences. I would say it's definitely very inspiring. I can't say
good to know
that you learn a lot, but it's definitely worth watching, like stories from any people who've done a lot. I think it's really great, and I loved watching one about Anna Wintour and kind of her life. So definitely recommend that one. But also check out Futureland Academy. Always good content
there you
here.
go. Nice.
Next, last question, and we have to wrap up very, very quickly. Do you have any experience where leadership wasn't understanding the importance of branding, and how did you navigate through that?
Yes. Yes and yes. I think being in a product world, right? Most of the tech companies I've worked in, so Facebook, y'all know that there's a product. Intercom was also a pretty product first company as well. I think one of their heads of product design was also an old Facebook person. So very product first. So I would say there is definitely, specifically being in-house, there is definitely a challenge in, advocating for the power and the value of brand. What I think has been really helpful in that is actually, and I mentioned it before, is not sort of going to leadership or like super high leadership as just brand coming to a thing. It's actually when you think about brand reaching horizontally, it's actually bringing together teams and working, I kind of think of the Infinity Wars ad where it's like the guy and he's like, everybody come together and then all the superheroes come. One of those things where the idea is that, you bring together all these different teams because brand touches everything. And then when you come together as like an empowered, like collaborative team, understanding the value of brand and also leveraging it with all of our other partners, that's where you get eyes, right? You go, oh, okay. So my product looks completely different from my website. Oh, brand. Okay. Oh, so again, it's about like shared goals, I think. So you're just not on an island, and really getting partnership and support from a lot of the other teams.
Brilliant.
Teresa just saw my Avengers reference. She knows what I'm talking about.
Amazing. Well, one last question before we wrap up, which is reflecting back on your experience, and you work with different teams and different companies in different leadership positions. If you could give advice to yourself 5 years ago that would save you a lot of time and energy and stress, what would you tell yourself?
It's a couple things, and I touched on it a little earlier. The first one is fail more, fail smarter, just keep failing. Again, I just had a really big fear of failure earlier, and if somebody would have told me, chill girl, this is part of it, you're failing great, I think that would have relieved a lot of anxiety, knowing that it was just part of, step 3 of a 10-step process. And I also think that this goes with it a little bit, is feedback is scary, but how do you get better if you don't get it and also give it? I've started to do that way later in my career, and I feel a little robbed that like, oh man, I had all these years where I could have been getting feedback from people, but I was too scared, or like my ego was too big to take it. So that would be another one. And then I think the overall thread, which might be a little harsh, but for, like earlier me, would have been, I think a friend told me once when I had challenge with suck it up, buttercup. Like, again, it's just, this is part of the process. It allows you to understand problems more deeply. It gives you empathy when things don't go your way, right? So that you're understanding like, hey, these are hard problems, and like, let's be empathetic to everybody. That's been sort of really helpful. I mean, suck it up isn't like probably the most gentle way to go around it, but for me specifically, I think I needed that little kick in the butt to realize that this is a long game, not a short game. And I'm still at the beginning of my long game. There's still so much to learn from my designers, from the creative community, and from a lot of the mentors and design leaders that I look up to every day.
Oh, such a great advice. Thank you so much, Liz. And so great to hear your perspective as well on all different matters. Really enjoyed our conversation. And thanks everyone for asking great questions as well. Love the questions.
Thanks everyone.